The welterweight division just added another ingredient into that cake batter. Islam Makhachev is coming to welterweight. That title is vacated.
Yes.
And he's on a one-way ticket up to 170. So today we're going to be going through the whole entire welterweight division rankings, at least. We're not doing all 100 of them. we ain't matchmaking those bottom feeders, okay?
Yeah, no, just the people in the rankings.
Yeah.
Okay.
And plus one other one. There's one outside of the rankings, but it's a banger matchup.
Some blonde.
And we're going to be matchmaking them.
Some blonde boy from Paris.
Yeah.
That's what
He
I like
owns
to hear.
Paris.
He does own Paris.
All right, starting it off with the champion, Jack Della Maddalena.
Oh, that feels good to say.
There's only one matchup for him now with Islam leaving lightweight. He's headed for that belt.
Well, I think he should have to face a contender first. I'm kidding. No, JDM versus Islam is 100% going to happen probably at the September-ish. JDM said that's when he wants to come back, and I'm sure Islam wants to get in there as soon as possible. Because let's be honest, he probably wants to retire at this point. Yeah. It's classic Dagestani.
He could realistically win the belt and retire, and I don't even hate that.
I wouldn't
because
be surprised.
Welterweight's in such a good spot that they don't need Islam.
True.
What if he just wins it? He's like, all right, I'm vacating this one. See, Hamzat, I'm coming for you.
That would be insane. No, they got the brotherly pact up there.
Yeah, but if Drickus beats Hamzat, sorry, Imavov, sorry, Kyle.
There's no way he's big enough to move up to middleweight. I just don't believe that he's big enough.
Why not? Why not try?
Yeah, for sure. Why not try? But who knows?
Yeah. But JDM versus Islam, it's the only logical matchup to make for the belt.
I'm so excited for this matchup. I think, I was not looking forward to this at all prior to seeing Bilal versus JDM because I was like, man, I don't think JDM's that top contender. Turns out this dude's a brick wall in terms of takedown defense.
He's Jose Aldo.
One of the best.
He's welterweight Jose Aldo.
One of the best striking masterclasses versus Canelo Hands himself. So it's just dude, I was trying to figure out. We have another video that we planned where it's coming up with weaknesses for fighters. JDM doesn't really have many weaknesses.
Yeah, there's only one minor thing.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
He's actually extremely good. I think taking a year off really helped him. Training with Craig Jones is a cheat code now to beating Dagestani wrestlers. I think if you look at Islam versus Volk in the past, that's a very interesting matchup because Volk was the smaller one coming up and he had a great performance when Craig Jones taught him the formula, the jiu-jitsu formula for beating these guys. And now JDM has that Bilal training under his belt, someone who likes to shoot takedowns, someone who's good fundamentally on the feet, but not great. I think Islam is going to be a great test for him, going to be more of a submission threat and a finishing threat than Bilal, obviously. So it's going to make those ground exchanges very interesting because if he gets to the ground, is JDM going to want to give up his back right away to get up? I don't know.
Wow. I don't even need to watch the fight now after hearing that, JDM's beating Islam. It's confirmed. You heard it here.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if JDM beat Islam.
That would be crazy.
I think it'd be a pretty big upset, too.
Ginger beating a Dagestani guy. Never heard of it.
Well, until Bo Nickel beats,
Yeah.
every middleweight.
All right. Our new number one contender, the former champion, Bilal Muhammad. His timetable, I think he's going to take some time off. Obviously probably not too much, but he's got to recover. Dude took some major damage to the face.
Yeah.
And his timetable kind of matches up similarly to another top welterweight contender who formerly was the number one contender. This fight was supposed to happen, but with him being injured now, I think he truly loses that number one contendership, especially with all the other fights that are going to be happening. So I think, sometime late 2025, you book Bilal versus Shavkat.
Yeah, so it's a good fight for sure. I think Shavkat doesn't deserve to go straight for the title anymore.
No.
He's 100% going to need another fight, especially with Brady literally just calling out everyone wanting a fight.
Brady's like, all right, I'll fight Luke, whoever wants it.
Yeah, exactly. And then you got Usman Buckley. Welterweight is in the best place, but also a logjam at the same time. And it's not for any bad reasons, just because so many top guys. And at a certain point, you got to start evaluating, okay, how much are we valuing a Leon win? How much are we valuing an Usman win or an Ian Gary win? Dude, it's freaking tough.
You just got to pit them up against each other. There's realistically a lot of guys who could be number one contenders that are one fight away from being number one contenders.
Yeah.
Morales could be considered a number one contender with a win over Burns because that's what JDM got. You know?
I wouldn't go that far, but I see your logic.
Obviously hyperbole there, but yeah, Bilal versus Shavkat, I think the timetables match up well, and
in 2027 when Shavkat
when they're both that fight's gonna get canceled number 3 times.
Yeah, I think that's a close fight. I would edge it to Shavkat just a little bit because of what we've seen with JDM. I think if you can box on the outside, we know that Shavkat is more dangerous on the ground. So I think it actually matches up quite well for Shavkat.
All right, our number 2 contender, Sean Brady. You know, he's ready to fight. He wants to fight again. So why not throw him up against Ian Gary, another guy who's very active? And I think that this is like, I think it's not a big step for Gary, but you know, the rankings don't tell the whole story. Mm-hmm. You know, I think Gary's a little bit better than, what is he, 7? You know, which is welterweight so good. Like, he's better than, I would honestly take him over Usman. I'd take him over Leon right now. So it's a little bit closer than what the rankings say. And I think that this is a true number 1 contendership fight. You know, Brady versus Gary. You throw this as like the 319 co-main.
Also, how did this dude win at 168 as a backup fighter? He ain't eating. He's on that vegan diet, brother. But yeah, this is a perfect fight because Brady wants it. Gary wants to stay active. He's coming off a win now, so I think that helps his case for getting a shot up in the rankings, which is perfect. And I think it's a very competitive matchup. Both guys coming into their primes. I can't wait for this fight.
What I think, too, with Gary is he's a very UFC-oriented guy. You know, he's the guy that's willing to take all these short notice fights. Brady took shorter notice against Leon, you know, a little bit of a reward, like call this a true number 1 contendership fight between Brady and Gary late summer. Our number 4 ranked welterweight is Leon Edwards. This is one of those tough parts because
is he even top 10 anymore?
Like, he's borderline top 10.
Yeah.
And you know, you think about the matchups, and a matchup I hear a lot that I think could be exciting, Leon versus MVP. The rankings are very far away, but like, who else does Leon fight? And
MVP has name value, you know?
Yeah.
You can't be giving these guys like Vicente Luque a shot because they don't have the name value. They're older. MVP's older, but he still has a lot of hype because he's relatively new to the UFC. So I think this is a fun, stylistic matchup. And it's also just like, you can throw it on a card as the featured fight, or maybe a co-main if you have a stack card.
It could main event a London fight night.
And 100% it could. Yeah, I think this is a good matchup. I think MVP actually has a decent shot to win this fight.
But the thing is, like, this fight could either be good or it could be so boring because we've seen MVP in the UFC either fight very aggressive or very tentative.
Yeah, and I think his style is just, you have to pick one pretty much. But Leon does have underrated jiu-jitsu, so we've seen what Ian Gary was able to do to him. I think Leon might follow that game plan, and unless he's asleep. Yeah. Sleepy Leon.
Yeah. All right, our next 2 fights, Usman versus Buckley, Burns Morales, have already been confirmed. We've talked about them in other videos.
Both good matchups.
So we're going to move on to number 9, I believe, Colby Covington. He's a guy that's like, who does this guy actually face? I think he fights someone outside of the rankings in his next fight. So why don't we go with Colby Covington versus Mike Malott, Canada versus America?
The buildup would be very good, I'll give you that.
You could throw this as like the opening fight of like a pay-per-view, but Covington versus Malott, like when you're looking at welterweights, who could go and fight this guy, Colby Covington? It's like, do I really want to see like a Neil Magny go and fight this guy? Like maybe if Michael Morales loses to Burns, then you throw him to Covington kind of thing, like a guy coming off a loss that you need to get a win back.
Yeah.
But there's nothing really for Covington. He's almost better off just to retire.
That's what I was going to say. I think he has a good shot at retiring because he wants money matchups and he wants fights that excite him. At this point, he doesn't really deserve any good fights anymore because he's just on a massive losing streak. He got MVP and then Buckley. So he's not going to get Usman because they've already fought. He's not going to get Buckley again. He's not going to get Leon again. Maybe an MVP, if that other matchup doesn't happen.
You could get some good stuff from an MVP versus Covington fight.
But it could be the worst fight of all time.
It could be weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't trust that.
So I think like Covington versus Malott, like, you have a good build. You might not get the best fight, but it's like Canada versus America.
It's interesting. It's definitely interesting.
All right. Our next 2 fights are both up and coming prospects facing off up against some veteran strikers. So if you want to swap the matchups here, but I have Jeff Neal versus Carlos Prates, the original fight that was booked before Jeff Neal got hurt, and Stephen Thompson versus the new welterweight Joel Alvarez, as long as he actually is going up to welterweight.
Such a good fight.
You know, you could flip-flop that and have Prates versus Thompson, Neal versus Alvarez. You could book either of those fights either way, and I wouldn't care.
Yeah.
You know, it's just two strikers up against each other, one up-and-comer versus one veteran. You know, you're getting a good fight either way in those matchups.
Yeah, I think they should rebook Neal versus Prates. I think that's extremely likely because it's a close matchup. We've seen Prates, his striking is on par with Ian Gary's, a little, like, definitely worse, but I think you have to also factor in the takedown threat of Ian Gary because we've seen what he did to MVP.
If they were boxing, I think I would take Prates, but in terms of mixed martial arts striking, you know, the same way that Islam's an elite striker in MMA, you have to give more credit to Gary in that fight.
For sure. So I think Neal versus Prates, great fight, and Alvarez deserves, I think, someone at that bottom half. I don't know if he'll actually get a Thompson because that's a big name, but if he did, I mean, this is a perfect fight.
Yeah, he could realistically get the one step down and fight Neil Magny like every other guy in welterweight.
And I think that's likely as well.
Yeah, so any of those gatekeepers. And then finally, speaking of Neil Magny, why don't we do Neil Magny versus fan favorite Brian Battle? You know, two guys that are maybe top 20 welterweights, you know, right around the rankings. Have these guys fight outside, and then the winner goes and faces a guy that, you know, maybe like a Luque versus Holland loser kind of thing. You know, one of the guys that's on a loss at the bottom of the rankings.
Luque versus Holland is such a pointless fight.
It makes no sense. Like, why is this fight happening?
I don't know, man.
They just threw it on. Is it on 316 or 17?
It's on a fight night.
I swear it was on a pay-per-view.
A night of fights.
It's something. It's happening at some point.
Yes.
But that's going to wrap it up for us today. Go down to the comments. Let us know, what do you think of our welterweight matchups? What welterweight matchup would you be the most excited to see? While you guys are down there, make sure you guys are liking and subscribing. We appreciate all the love and support. And we'll see you guys next time. Peace.
See